Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to quickly show you how to make some really cool procedural rust using the PBR Painter add-on for Blender. I'm using version 2.10, which is currently in the beta stage, because it has a bunch of new features that are really cool and really important for this type of material. So I'm going to get started now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the cube, and I'm going to be doing this on a Suzanne head. So the reason for that is that basically by doing it on this Suzanne, it's something that you can easily follow along with, in the sense that you can just make the exact same thing and then you can just follow the steps exactly and you can make sure you're doing it correctly, and you should be able to get pretty much the exact same result as what I'm getting in here. The other reason is Suzanne, once I actually apply a shade smooth and then apply a subdivision surface modifier, which I'm going to do up to a level of 2, Suzanne has some nice curvature and crevices, which is really important for what I'm going to show you. But if you have your own model and you want to add rust to that model, you can follow along with all the steps. So everything should be pretty much exactly the same, and you should get a really nice result for your model specifically. So feel free to do that if you want to. Alright, so I'm going to jump across to texture paint mode. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new material using the PBR Painter interface, and I'm going to click this button called Setup Material for PBR Painter, and basically that'll get everything set up in the node tree so that I can do that painting. I'm going to turn off backup current material because I don't need a backup. By the way, if you want to add rust to a material that you've already saved outside of the add-on, you'll get an option to kind of keep that material as a background, and that's really useful if you kind of want to add rust, as I said, to your previously made materials. If you want to make it from scratch, you just do the process that I'm doing here. So clicking OK, so that's ready to go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to call this one metal, and that's going to be my metal background. So you can pick whatever material you want for the background metal. I'm just going to show you an example using a set of textures that I've downloaded, and I'll put the link to that metal material in the description. And I'm going to use this new button in version 2.1, which is this import multiple textures. So I'm going to click that. And basically what that lets me do is it lets me select a bunch of different textures and then click import, and they'll just be instantly imported into all of the correct channels, and then I can just straight away do that painting onto the model. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit fill and then fill this, and that's going to be my background. So I just want to change a couple of things for a start. So I'm going to drop the normals a little bit because I find them to be a little bit too strong in this case, so I'm going to put that at something like 0.5. And I'm also going to change the mapping because there's this giant seam down the middle. So going into texture mapping, I'm going to change that to box. And I'll put the seam blend to something like 0.3. And that'll get rid of those seams. And I might change the scale to something like 2. Like that. Alright, so that's my background. So now I'm going to get to the main part of the tutorial, which is this rust material. So adding a new layer and calling it rust. First thing I'm going to do in this layer is I'm going to add a layer mask. So basically the look I'm going to go for, as I showed in that first set of images, is the kind of rust in the crevices look. So this is kind of a situation whereby you have this water accumulating in the crevices, which kind of leads to that rusting effect. Sometimes this isn't the case, so depending on what you actually want the look to be, you might change this first step. But just for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to do this effect. So in order to do that, I'm going to use an ambient occlusion mask. And for that, I have a couple of options. So I could just use this one here, which will do that for me. But there's actually something in the preset called grunge, and that uses a mask but does some more complicated stuff as well. So I'm going to use that instead. So clicking OK. Now, if I try to preview this with Eevee, it's not going to work because I need to switch to cycles, so I'm going to do that for a start. And jumping into render mode, I get something that looks like this. So that's kind of the preset mask as it stands, and if you want to, you can kind of change a bunch of these different parameters. You can generate the ambient occlusion from the normals, so it doesn't do much because there's not many normals in my material, but if you have some kind of deep cracks or whatever that are just normals, you can click that and then you can get it to generate the mask using those cracks. So that's really useful in that sort of situation. So I'm not going to play around with this too much, but you can kind of play around with these different settings if you want to. I'm just going to kind of leave it mostly as it is. I might just drop this color amp to kind of get a bit more like that. Something like that. That just kind of looks like something in the crevices. I'm going to modify this more, so don't worry too much about the specifics. And once I've done that, so there's a couple of options now. So if you're kind of using cycles and you're happy to keep going in cycles, you don't have to bake this. But if you want to use Eevee, or you want to be able to kind of preview it as you're going without being in cycles render, you can bake this to an alpha map. And the way we're going to do that is I'm just going to click merge visible masks. And what this is going to do is it's going to bake it to a single mask, which is an alpha map. And I don't need a particularly high resolution for this. So something like 2K is fine, as we'll see later. So I'm just going to do that and I'm going to click OK. So when I do that, basically what it's doing is it's just baking that to an alpha map, as I said. And then we're going to be able to, there we go, be able to visualize this without using cycles. So I'm just going to go back out of cycles now, back to Eevee. And then as you'll see, we can now see that and use it. All right, so that's kind of the basis and the foundation for the look that I'm going for, but I'm going to make it a little bit more interesting, and I'm going to add another mask on top of that, and I'm going to make this procedural. And then I'm going to create a kind of merged effect between those two masks. So for a second, I'm going to click preview selected mask, and that's going to let me visualize just this mask. And I'm going to play around with these settings a bit. So in general for Rust, you want really high detail because that's going to give it a really nice sort of crumbly, fine grain look. So I'm going to put that to 10. I'm going to put this up to something like 0.85, so it looks kind of like that. And now I'm going to kind of, I think the scale's fine for now. I might put it down a little bit. And now I'm going to preview the mask stack, and then I'm just going to play around with these color ramps to try and get the kind of effect that I'm after. So if I drop this one up, or I pull this one up, you can see that it kind of is mostly in these crevices, but is kind of extending out based on this procedural mask. So if I play around now with this blend factor, if I go down to 0, it's all crevice. If I go down to up to 1, it's all procedural. But if I go somewhere kind of in between, whoops, then you can sort of control how much you want it to isolate in the cracks. And you can also do things like play around with the color ramp in this crevice one as well, and get a really sort of personalized effect, whatever you're after. So I'm just going to play around with this a little bit. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I think that looks fine. So that's kind of mostly in the cracks and crevices, but it does extend out a little bit. And I'm just going to put my phone on silent. And I think I'm happy with that. I can always play around with this later, as I will show you. So stopping the previewing now. So what I'm going to do is, for now, I'm just going to fill this layer again, and this will just apply it everywhere. Nothing's happened because I haven't turned on any channels yet, and that's what I'm going to do now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on albedo. So what you'll see now is that it's kind of applied this white color everywhere. It's very faint, and to solve this problem, I'm going to use something that's brand new in version 2.1 again, and that's this mask multiplier. So basically what this does is it multiplies the mask output independently for every channel. So you can kind of have your general mask, but then you can customize how it is applied to each channel. So for example, if I up this, it's basically just multiplying that mask so that I get a really strong kind of albedo, and then I can use a lower value for something like normals if I want less of a normal effect, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to use that for now, something like that, just to kind of make it a little bit more strong and a little bit more clear. And what I'm going to do for albedo is I'm going to use a procedural type, and then I'm going to generate kind of the colors that are going to make that mask, sorry, that rusk effect. All right, so just to kind of set this up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click preview on mesh. And now I'm going to play around with these parameters to get this looking like rust. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to again put the detail up, because you kind of want it to match that rust look. So you want to kind of have something pretty high. It doesn't have to be as high as it was previously, but something like that's pretty good. I might drop the scale a little bit. And most important thing now is the color ramp, and this is going to give it the colors that are associated with that rust. So I've played around with this previously, and I've kind of got a few colors that I think look pretty good. So I'm going to try and replicate that now. So definitely have a go at doing this yourself and get the colors that you like. But I'm just going to do something that looks kind of good. I actually wrote down some values, so I'm just going to copy these in. But yeah, as I said, definitely play around with this and get whatever you think looks good. So either copy me in what I'm typing or just do your own. So that's going to be one color, and that's going to be at 0.332. I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to put this one at 0.418. And I'm going to do this particular color. All right. Alright, now I'm just going to have one more, and I'm going to put this at, what am I going to do, 0.541. Now you may not like this particular color setup, which is fine. Change it if you want to. And in general, rust looks very different. Sorry, different rust will look different depending on what's causing the rust, what the material is. So yeah, very much dependent on what you actually want, the effect you want. And this final one is just going to go to 0.645, and it's going to be something like this. Like that. So that's kind of the rust effect that I've got. So stopping the previewing now. So now you can see that it's kind of applying that to the areas that I wanted, which is looking alright so far. So that's kind of on the way there. So I'm going to leave the albedo channel for now, and then I'm going to jump across to metallic. So I'm going to drop the metallic to 0 because I want the rust to not be that kind of metallic look. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically adjust this multiplier to kind of match that albedo. So you can go anywhere from 1, which is not much. You can go all the way past, which kind of looks weird because you've gone over the edges, but you can kind of just tune this to kind of get the effect that you want. So I think something like that looks alright. I think it looks okay having a little bit extending over the edges. It kind of looks a bit worn. So I'm just going to do something like that. So that's the value for that if you want to copy it. And the next one I'm going to do is roughness. And again, I'm going to change this. So it's going to have a different roughness to the metal underneath. And I'm just going to use a constant value of something like 0.8, I think. I can't remember what I did previously, but I think something like that. And again, I'm just going to adjust this multiplier to kind of hit the edges a little bit, like that. So I think that looks kind of good, like that. So maybe a little bit less. Maybe something like that. Doesn't matter too much. The most important one I'm going to do, which is going to make the effect look much better, is the normal channel. So switching that on, I'm going to keep that as constant, I think, and I'm just going to do a bump height of 1, and when I do that, you'll kind of see that now it's got this bump effect. The reason it's looking bumpy when I've just got a constant bump height is, remember, it's using that bumpy mask, so that's what's giving that effect. And again, I'm just going to up this multiplier, and that's going to really bring it out. I might also drop the strength. So as I was watching through the video, I realized I forgot to click this combine normals button in my tutorial. And that's really important because I'll just show you that now. What that's going to do is it's going to actually bring that metallic materials normals through, as opposed to just kind of flattening at the area. So it's kind of subtle in this case, but if your metal has stronger normals, you're definitely going to want to use that. So I would definitely recommend using that in general because it's always going to look better and it's always going to look more realistic. Anyway, that's it. Back to the video. To something like that. And I think that's going to be kind of the effect that I want. I might go a bit stronger, or at least pull this up a little bit. And I think I'll do something like that. And that's basically it. So that's kind of it for the general setup. As I said, play around with these depending on the look you want. Feel free to kind of change these. So now that that's kind of set up, I'm going to go back into the layer masks, and then I'm going to actually adjust this now that I have the rust on the material. So now you'll kind of see what I was saying about changing this blend factor. So if you go all the way through, you kind of get it everywhere, which looks a bit stupid. But if you kind of drop that back, you can kind of decide how much you want it to appear in the crevices and how much you want it to go across the actual model. So I think something like that's fine. You can also go in and change this color ramp. So pulling this back, you kind of get more coverage as well. Or you can kind of do that. You can drop this one. All sorts of things you can do in these tools. So definitely this would be where you kind of play around and get the look you want. I might increase this roughness a bit maybe. And just kind of adjust that. Maybe something like that. Pull this in to get it kind of sharper. And yeah, so I'm going to do something like that. I might drop this again actually. I might make this a bit smaller. And I'm going to do something like that, I think. And then I might just put this up a bit. Probably stop because I'll spend too long just kind of fiddling with this. But yeah, so that's kind of the gist of what you're going to do. And that's the effect. So I'll leave it there. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions or there's something you didn't understand or something didn't work, definitely leave a comment and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, hit like if you liked it, hit subscribe if you haven't already, And other than that, thanks for watching and I will catch you next time. Cheers.